This porta potty controversy in Washington, D.C. is growing by leaps and bounds. The porta potty company we'll get to it a little bit later on, but we're not going to talk porta potties when we have precious little time with Trey Hardin, ABC News political analyst. Good morning, Trey Hardin.
Good morning. In some ways, that's just a great segue to my little my segment.
Speaking of porta potties, here's Trey Hardin.
I can't say I've ever been introduced that way, but I think maybe it's appropriate.
All right. So Donald Trump said yesterday, health care for everybody, and he's going to lower my deductible. Good times are here again.
Well, McGraw, there's a saying in the world I work in public relations communications that words matter. Well, he certainly has flipped that whole that whole theory or that practice on its head as president-elect, and I think he will even as president. His words don't necessarily matter because, for example, when he says he wants to do this, wants to do that. I think many here in town, in Congress, even his own cabinet, which obviously we've seen some potential conflicts or contradictions from the testimony of his nominees for their confirmation hearings, they know and that some of the things he has said either are not doable or simply not constitutionally or legally allowed to be done. For example, when he talks about how if a company decides to move a plant over the border, that he'll go ahead and by executive order or by declaration just tax them or put this tax on them, that's simply not realistic or doable. I mean, he certainly can propose, and Congress can pass an industry-specific tax or just a general public policy on that front that could apply that, like the border tax. But he can't say, okay, I'm going to penalize a specific company. So there's that, and then to your point on the health care front, yes, it got the attention of Republicans on the Hill, and certainly gave them a little angst, but at the end of the day, they know that he's just saying what he needs to say. They're going to try to repeal Obamacare and replace it with something that they want to do that certainly isn't a universal health care coverage thing. They want to make it a market-based approach.
But there's political speak, and you know that politicians are great at not answering questions, deflecting, block and pivot, and running out the time on the interview. So when they say, what are you going to replace it with, which basically means less care and more money, or however you want to look at it, cynically, he doesn't have that filter. So when he says health care for everybody, is that not going to come back and haunt him at some point whenever they come up with something which is not going to be health care for everybody?
Well, no, because, my commentary on the whole practice of words do matter. To him, I don't think words really matter to him either. I think he knows that he is willing to say or tweet what he wants, and he doesn't care about the consequences. He certainly doesn't care about the media scrutiny anymore. And he knows that he's got this huge honeymoon or latitude with the many, many supporters that voted for him in the election. So I don't think at all he's worried about it coming back to bite him. I think he views things as, okay, they'll be said, but 2 months from now people will forget, or even if they don't, who cares? He's going to be trying to solve problems. This is one area where I think it's a little bit of a peek in what his presidency will be like, is that he's going to be the PR guy, say a lot, and then his cabinet, which there have been contradictions here early on, and Congress are going to be driving the train on the public policy side of things. And is it going to at times contradict what comes out of his mouth or what ends up on his Twitter feed? Sure. But he's going to quickly make people forget that if Congress and his cabinet are doing good things, and then he stands up there and takes credit for it.
In that same vein, talking about NATO possibly being obsolete, right?
Yeah,
that is the Republic. I mean, Republicans have no use for the UN, but universally they love NATO and everything it comes with. And then for him to just in one sentence say it's obsolete, it's unbelievable what he's saying.
Yeah, yeah. Don't get me wrong. So I don't mean to completely diminish this words don't matter thing to him, and or that they necessarily shouldn't matter to us when we're reading his Twitter feed or hearing what he says. But to your question, yes, there are some things that come out of his mouth that do indeed have consequences, certainly on the national security and international relations front, because they could have ultimately impact the relationships or the posturing that goes on. And now, to him again, he may not care about that because his view of the world is, well, I don't care what the world thinks about us because we're going to do something one way, and it's going to be our way, and the world can either get on board or not get on board. Again, I think that's unrealistic to a certain degree. I do like the strength and the leadership, but I think it's unrealistic. But that one simply has to scare folks and has to boggle the mind. Now, we're not leaving NATO. I mean, so to go back, take a step back to what I said earlier about things that he says and that are not going to happen. We're not leaving NATO. That's just simply Congress wouldn't allow it. He can say what he wants on that, but it doesn't erase the fact that it's just almost outrageous to hear and is disconcerting to hear and again, just representative of kind of the surreal times that we're in with this incoming president.
Trey Hardin, hopefully your seatbelt's on because it's going to be a heck of a ride. Have a good week.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Have a good week. Talk to you next Tuesday.
Too.
All right. 626, Big 550.